welcome in to our first ever Nerds Rooting Sports Fantasy Football Podcast. We are very, very excited to break down some content for you. To be honest, me and Anders are both very much fantasy nerds. So again, just to introduce ourselves, my name is Zac Tipton, and my co-host here is the amazing Anders Pryor. Uh, and we are both fantasy football nuts. So, Anders, how many leagues would you say you play in a year?
Usually, well, first of all, it's Jack. It's great to see you. I like how last week or last episode it was esteemed, and this time it's awesome. I appreciate the versatility there. I would say that I only really ever I only think I ever do two leagues at a time, but I am someone who I don't like to spread myself thin. I like to kind of fully invest in each league and take each one very seriously. I'm very much in terms of leagues, a quality over quantity person in terms of the notes that I keep over the course of the year and all the kind of just data that I like to organize. So I'm quality over quantity in that sense, but I know you're in like what 18 or 19 or something.
You're funny. No. Definitely not that many, but like 6 or 7 a year is kind of where I'm at. Just because, well, here's the thing. A lot of my leagues that I'm in have been going for a lot of years.
Right.
So, like, this is my third year in like 4 different leagues. And two of which are dynasty and 2 of which are redraft, but they just kind of renew it after every year. So, at this point, I've just gotten really kind of good at knowing those because those are all my go-tos. And then usually a friend group of mine will start a different podcast. Will start their own fantasy football league and invite me to join it. And so I'll end up getting in a couple more that way.
Yeah, usually, the league that Zach and I are in together with our kind of social circle from college, I think this specific iteration of that, I think it's going to be its third year.
Third year of ours.
I've been doing fantasy with like my step family. I think this will be like our 6th year, but the problem is that the availability of people has fluctuated. So
yeah, absolutely.
It's been going on. The league has been intact for 6 years, but it's been going on. But there's people come in and out. Versus, I feel like the one that we're in, it's the same group. It's with maybe exception of like one person. It's the same group of 12 people every time.
Yeah, no, my group that I'm in, the main one that I'm in is I'm in more than Andrews, but the main one that I'm in is friends of mine from back home. We started a dynasty league. I think this is our 5th year of it, actually. But the membership has fluctuated. Like, we have lost people, and then we've added new people, and we've kind of got a core group now. But we do lose people every once in a while to falling outs or just don't want to be in the group, don't want to be in it anymore. We have that, but it's still a fun time to do it, and I love it. I'm a big fantasy, like I said, I'm a big fantasy nut. I've been playing fantasy football since I was 9 to 10 years old. My dad's church league, where I drafted Adrian Peterson first overall, and it was the greatest pick of my life. It was his MVP year, and obviously it's been fun since then. And so, I've always grown it. I've always loved it. It's kind of been the one thing I've always kind of had constant in my life is fantasy football.
We last year for this past season that just happened, Zach had the first pick, and it was announced an hour before the start time of the draft. And it was not phrased as, "Oh my God, I got the first pick." It was phrased as, "Oh my God, I got Justin Jefferson." It could not have been more. It could not have been more poetic, and it could not have been. I've never seen someone be that ecstatic. He sounded over text more excited to get that first pick than he has when the Vikings actually win a game. So
that is well, there are some games like the Bills game couple of years ago, I definitely was probably more ecstatic there. But no, as Standards kind of pointed out, I am a Vikings fan, so that is kind of my thing.
Before we get to the sleepers, the quick like fantasy question. I know that right now Jettas is sitting currently at like the 5 or 6 overall pick. I think a lot of that has to do with McCarthy. In your mind, like how does that sort of stand in terms of like, like,
yeah, absolutely.
Is he still your wide receiver 1, or is that changed?
I personally, and it is a little biased for me, so it's hard to like remain unbiased when I'm talking about him. But I personally would still keep him as my wide receiver 1 just because he can do things that I've just never seen a wide receiver really be able to do in terms of production. Like what, he played 8 games last year and still hit 1,000 yards, wasn't it?
Right.
Like he played 8 games and still hit 1,000 yards. Like what he does on the field is so incredible that I think whoever's throwing to him, like he had in those 8 games, he basically had Nick Mullins and Jaron and Josh Dobbs throwing to him for all those 8 games, and he still hit 1,000 yards.
Right.
So I find it very hard to like truly say he's not my wide receiver 1, but to me it's Hill or to me it's between 3 guys. It's Hill, CD, and Jettas. Those are my kind of your top 3 guys, and I kind of could see an argument for everywhere. Me personally, like if I was doing this completely unbiased, I'd probably say just because of the QB situation, I'd probably say CD is my number 1 this year.
Mm-hmm.
And then Hill would be 2 and Jettas would be 3. Like unbiased, that's probably it. But if I had the second overall pick or third overall pick, I'm gonna be honest, I had the first, I'd probably take CMC. But if I had the second or third, I'm taking Jettas.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm at there. So that is my take. I still think he'll be insanely productive. I find it hard not to believe he won't hit 1,800 yards this year, 1,900 yards this year. He might even hit 2,000. I really do believe he has a chance. But I can see why he's definitely not number 1 because I do understand the scariness of Sam Darnold and the scariness of the QB situation in Minnesota. But yeah, so kind of today, what Anna's kind of alluded to is kind of we want to focus on our sleepers this year. And to be honest, it's not so much as sleepers as guys we think that are just going to overperform their values. Like there's going to be guys on here that aren't going to be sleepers. There are going to be guys on here that are going to be like top 5 at their position. But we're going to still kind of bring them up as sleepers just because we think they'll overperform what they're already expected to do at a high level. And so to start that and kind of going off of what I just said there, Anders, if you would like to introduce your first sleeper.
I would love to get us started. And yeah, again, this is going to be a mixture of guys that will be firmly in the top 100 picks that we just think either from a just in a vacuum standpoint or strategically will overperform their value. And then other guys in here that are more like kind of people that it is only realistic that they will be on your bench, but we think that they're smart picks because of the range of outcomes. That's a phrase that you hear a lot in the fantasy community, range of outcomes. And that is a big part of how I've based a lot of these. So it's going to be a mixture of pretty familiar names, and we'll explain why we consider them sleepers. And then because the word sleeper means different things for some people versus others, just depending on what expectations are. But I'll get started with my QB sleeper 1. The way that we're going to do this is we're each going to have 2 quarterbacks, 3 running backs, 3 receivers, and 2 tight ends. So the first quarterback that I want to talk about is CJ Stroud. So for CJ, I think the line of logic there is that there are, I would say, 6 quarterbacks that have top 2 QB for fantasy as a realistic outcome for them. And this is not in any particular kind of order, because again, sometimes Zach and I use similar interfaces, sometimes we use different ones, so it depends. But in general, there are, I think, 6 quarterbacks that have a very realistic shot of having their ceiling be QB2, which is Allen, Hurts, Mahomes, Lamar, Richardson, and Stroud. I think those are the 6. And of those 6, Stroud in general, if depending on where you do, the margins will be different depending on where you draft. But across all of them, Stroud consistently has the cheapest price tag. And I think that gives you the room that you need to be able to bolster your roster while still getting the same upside that you would get if you took Lamar a round earlier or Hurts 2 rounds earlier. I think the range of outcomes is still the same, and you can wait a round or 2 and be able to invest in, getting that tight end that you really want in like Laporta or Kelsey, or, getting room to do things that you want at the top of your roster. And so I think it makes a lot of sense. I think that given where he is, which right now kind of sits in like the 5 to, depending on the size of your league, in the round 5 to 6 range, and also depending on, because you're drafting against human beings and, you don't know what people's perception of quarterbacks are. He, I think, is the perfect quarterback for someone who does not really want to punt QB and who doesn't really feel comfortable with streaming, but that also doesn't want to kind of put all their eggs in one basket with an Allen. I think that he's in that perfect middle ground. I think some people would put Burrow and Dak in that same kind of middle territory, but I think of those 3, Stroud has the most upside, and I think that his ADP shows that. And the other thing that I really like about Stroud, and this is my last point before I let you respond and go to yours, Zach, is I think that of everyone, Stroud has the most high quality and realistic stack options. Nico Collins, Stephon Diggs, Tank Dell, and Dalton Schultz are all realistic high-quality stack options for Stroud. If you're someone who likes to punt the tight end position, which we're seeing more and more now because there are more and more talented tight ends that come in all the time in the NFL, doing the Stroud-Schultz stack, I think, is a perfect strategy. And so I just think, given the combination of the upside, the range of outcomes, the price tag, where you're getting him, and all the people that you can stack with him, that is kind of would be my most ideal choice. Zach, what do you think?
I think you're right. I think CJ Stroud had one of the best rookie seasons we've ever seen by a QB. He was absolutely phenomenal. He kind of set the tone for that class in a lot of ways. And he kind of almost hurried up the process for the Texans a lot faster than what they originally thought probably was going to happen. So I think I have to agree. I think Stroud, he has the weapons to be able to compete every single year in and year out for a top QB spot. And I just think he's going to be. I don't see a way he regresses. So I think, obviously, I think Stroud is a good pick. I think his ADP is 5 right now. ADP is like the 5th QB off the board, which I think is about where I'd probably take him as well.
Yeah, ESPN, which is what I use, has him at 6.
Really, I'm looking at ESPN as at 5. That's weird.
Oh, it's 5? Oh, okay. Maybe that's okay.
I don't know. Maybe I'm looking at it wrong. I was looking at ESPN too, and they had him at 5. So that's why. But that is fair. So I will switch over to mine, which, similar to Anders, is in that same group of guys, but his upside is in a tremendous situation, which is Anthony Richardson, a guy I've been high on since the draft. There was part of me that kind of wanted the Vikings to trade up and get Anthony Richardson a couple of years last year's draft. But I think Anthony Richardson, I'm very high on him. I've been high on him for a while. I think he has the upside of an all-time superstar. with his legs and with his ability to throw the ball. We saw a glimpse of that at the beginning of the season last year before he got hurt. You had people jumping on a hype train that I've never seen at a rate. I don't know if you've seen a hype train go that fast, Anders, as Anthony Richardson did in the first few weeks of this past season. But what he did was just absolutely incredible in those first few weeks. And obviously he got hurt, and that kind of drops down his value a little bit because you're a little scared, especially with his body type, with the way he runs. You're kind of scared that there's a chance he's going to be like an injury-prone kind of QB. But if he's healthy, there's no doubt in my mind he has a chance to be a top 5 QB for the next 10 years. And I just think he has this innate ability to be so dominant in both facets of running and passing. And I really like him as a QB. I really like him as a prospect. I think, like I said, I think ESPN has him at QB 6 on my list. And so I think he has that chance to be QB 2.
Yeah.
And so, Anders, I'd love to hear your response, and then obviously you can go on.
No, maybe I must have been flipping the different things. I know that also, ESPN has their general rankings, but then they also have individual people do their specifics. And so, you'll see Stroud 5, Richardson 6. You'll see it inverted, or you'll see like Richardson 6, Stroud 7, or inverted. But no, different people have different levels of anxiety when it comes to injury history and fantasy. If you are someone who does not get worried, or if you are someone where unless that person is starting off the year on the IL, you don't really take injury history into consideration, Richardson should be absolutely on your radar if you're not going after like Allen. And I think that realistically, obviously it's hard to measure the trajectory because he played for so few weeks, but there's a realistic chance that he's going ahead of Lamar and Mahomes from just a fantasy perspective if he kept up that pace. So if you are not bitten off by that and you're not scared of injury stuff, some people are, which I think is totally fair because I think there are just players that have certain histories. But if you're not, then Richardson, absolutely, that would be something that no one would bat an eye at. That I would totally advocate for that. The second person I want to bring up, I think both Zach and I's next picks are sort of more so like they're more in that kind of standard like sleeper sort of category. So I want to talk about Caleb Williams because to me, for Caleb, and the talking points about him are obviously very popular. I actually think, I am talking about him as a sleeper because of the upside, of course. I actually think as well that the ceiling for him is much higher than people would sort of perceive just based on his playing style and based on other factors, given the talent room, with Moore, Allen, they're getting a Dunze, Cole Kmet being there, Gerald Everett, he's going to be throwing the ball to Swift out of the backfield a lot. So I think the talent that he has around him actually raises his ceiling to what is higher than you would expect. ESPN, I think, currently has him sitting at the QB 13 spot. I'm not sure. I think on Sleeper, he's like...
I have my QB 13 as well.
13 as well? Okay. If he is going to be as good as we think he will be, which to play conservatively, let's say that best case scenario for him is what Stroud did last year, then there is no reason to not have him on your roster because that is absolutely someone that you can get as a bench quarterback. And
what's worst case scenario? You're not going. I want to know from you. I know you're going into the best case scenario. What is worst case scenario for you with him? I feel like his floor is higher than others, but also I don't know what his floor would be. So I'd love to know what your.
I think his floor. I would say that his floor is probably somewhere in the vicinity of like the best that we saw of like Darnold when he was on the Jets. That's probably the floor. Maybe I'd have that's a really good question. I that's like just the stylistic floor, I think, more so than like the numerical floor. Um, I think that range of out when you take that range of outcomes, I think putting him at QB 13 is probably it feels correct. Um, but I think that I do think that because of the talent around him, and you got to remember, like the Bears don't have the first pick because they were awful. They have the first pick because Carolina was awful, and they added more talent. And so I think that the defense is going to be better, and I think that they're going to be playing with a lot of leads. And so I think that he is someone where if you want to either punt the QB, I am not, and let me be clear about this pick. I am not advocating that Caleb Williams be your starting quarterback. I know that, I try not to do that with rookies. I know that last year, a lot of people kind of instantaneously jumped the ship and put Anthony Richardson in their starting lineup because of the upside there. But I tend to not to, and I think that stays put here. But if you're someone who wants to punt the position and starts the year off with like Tua or Goff or Cousins or someone in that kind of territory, I think that he is the perfect complement to that, where if he does hit his ceiling, which I think the odds of him doing it are a little bit higher than you would expect, but it's not guaranteed, which is why I'm not advocating to start him week 1, then if it works out, then you're not making a huge sacrifice because the difference between him and, picking between him and Kirk or him and Tua is a pretty easy choice. And if it doesn't work out, then you already have someone stable on the roster already. So I think there's a very specific way to use him. But I think at QB 13, I think where you can realistically get him in like the 130s in terms of ADP, I think that's well worth the investment.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, for me, I just have a hard time thinking sleeper for Caleb Williams. I understand kind of where you're coming from, but I look at it also as like he's the number 1 overall pick. He's going to a team with 3 wide receivers that could probably be wide receiver 1s on respected teams. And then he's also going to a place that has a tight end that I think is one of the more underrated tight ends in the league. He's kind of, but again, it is the Bears, so that's fair. But like, I don't know. I just find it very hard to think of him as like a guy that's a sleeper, but I think I understand what you're saying. His ADP is 13, QB 13, but he has a chance of being, QB top 7.
Right. Like if you
like that.
Yeah, where like his ceiling is 7 and then his floor is like 19 or 20. If you average those, I think 13 feels about right.
So I don't know if I'd really consider him a sleeper, but I also understand what you mean. I think obviously it's hard to really doubt the number 1 pick, but also I don't know. I just never trust the Bears, but I think their organization's heading a different way. But I mean, then they kept Eberflus though, which I never understood that. But anyway, so I will move on to mine, and mine is a little different than Anders. This is kind of a very different pick. This is a person that is currently going as the QB 24 on ESPN, and I just think he's in for a bounce back season. And that is Bryce Young. Bryce Young to me is a guy that I look at and I say, number 1 overall pick, had a really rough rookie year. But there were flashes. There were flashes of signs that he could be good. And I will also look at it as, I don't see how with Dave Canales now in Carolina, how he could be worse than what he did last year. I only see a chance for him to improve. And last year he improved. He was QB 25 in terms of points. So I really only see a chance for him to improve with Dave Canales in Carolina. So like for me, I feel like his floor, personally, because he will start every game in Carolina, his floor personally to me is like probably QB 17, QB 18, I think, in my opinion. But his ceiling to me can be probably QB 10, QB 11. So when you're thinking of it, he is a guy that you could draft in a very late round. His current ADP is he is going pick 168 is his current. So you could draft him very late in drafts as a backup QB and hope for the best. I know I do that a lot of times where I'll take a guy that maybe had a bad year before or maybe doesn't have much of a chance, but is going to get a starting role and take him late and see if he improves as a bench guy and possibly turns into a starter for me. And that's kind of a good way I see Bryce Young being here. It's really hard for me to see him being worse in QB 18 with Dave Canales there and with them doing a little bit to improve at least the wide receiver core and the RB core. I find it very hard to believe that he will be worse than QB 18. But that's just me. Anders, do you have a response to that? What are your thoughts?
So I am a little biased because I did not love Bryce Young going into the draft. Well, you've sold me a little bit. Let me throw a couple things out for you. If you had to pick, like, given the weapons and everything they're going to have access to, and I brought it up at the beginning of the show, would you rather have Bryce Young or JJ McCarthy?
Oh, Bryce Young. I don't think JJ McCarthy plays this year.
At all?
I don't think he plays this year. I really don't.
Well,
I think Sam Darnold will get majority of the snaps, and I really don't see a way in which JJ McCarthy really, unless he goes absolutely ballistic in training camp or like starts having like really, really good practices, I don't see a way in which he plays this year. I really do believe the Vikings want him to develop for a year before they really put him out on the field.
What about No, that's fair. That's fair. I think, yeah, there's a lot of I think that, yeah, he's not like, he can only get better. I agree that whatever his 80, what did you say it was, 29?
24. He was a QB 24.
QB 24. Yeah, I think he will finish above that. I think especially like if you're in a 2 QB league or a 14 person league, and you are sort of, okay, do I go with like this person who has like some upside with like Bryce Young, or do I take someone else, maybe like a rookie? Do I go with like, Drake May or like maybe just stash away JJ McCarthy just in case? The Bryce Young argument, I think to that point becomes pretty easy to understand. So I think I agree with you there.
Yeah, no, and also I think again, like I said, the main point for me is Dave Canales. And
right.
You and me have both expressed our belief that he is a really good coach and our belief in
I think
him
he's the perfect coach for Bryce Young.
Yeah. And so look what he did with Geno Smith. Look what he did with Baker Mayfield.
Yep.
I just really look at it like Bryce Young is in for a very good year, or in for a year that's at least
better
breakout.
Right.
For better breakout year for him. So I think I have to believe that he'll be better this year just because I do trust Dave Canales that much. But again, there is still the scariness of last year was not that great, and he's the number 1 overall pick. And so.
Yeah. No, and Geno and Baker are both a little bit undersized, kind of like how Bryce is. So yeah. I think so. He's willing to work. So physically, there are some similarities as well.
Absolutely.
So next, we're going to move on to the running back position. And each of us have So we each have 3 for this. So the first person that I want to bring up as someone who I think will overperform their value is Rachaad White. Now, I think that in terms of just a fantasy football optics standpoint, I am a huge fan of Rachaad White. I think that if you are someone who right now on fantasy on ESPN, from what I have in my notes, he's sitting at the RB 14.
I have
If
an RB 15.
15, okay. If you are someone who is at if I'm painting a scenario, if you are someone who likes to do or who's doing full PPR and wants to just hammer wide receiver, so you're sitting at the top of the draft and you want to get one of the big 5 in Lamb, Hill, Chase, Jet, or St. Brown, if you get one of those 5 guys and then you want to wait for the 2-3 turn and then double down by getting, depending on who's there, Devontae Adams, Devontae Smith, AJ Brown, someone like that, maybe like if you really like Nico Collins, someone like that, who's someone that I really like. And then on that turn, getting Rachaad White as your running back 1 to complement the heavy wide receiver approach, I would feel totally comfortable with that. And that's something that I probably might plan on doing myself. I think that the volume will definitely be there. I think that overall the depth chart is very unintimidating. I don't really believe that Bucky Irving and Chase Edmonds are legitimate threats.
Don't
to
disrespect Bucky Irving like that. I love
Well,
Bucky Irving, but I agree. I agree with you. I'm sorry. I'm a big Bucky Irving
No,
fan.
of course. No, and
but
I am too. I just don't love the situation for him.
I think this year, especially, I don't see him doing much. That's the
Right.
thing. So
I think, yeah, I think I totally no, I think that Rashad, nothing was done this year to kind of inhibit on his ecosystem, and it really is his backfield. I think that somewhat, given that he's going to be available in the 3rd round and have that be projected for that percentage of the carries, I think that's a really kind of safe, very easy, deep breathe combination of traits for me. I think that 1,000 yards is absolutely on the table.
he got 1,000 yards last year. I really believe he does. He's going to get there this year again.
I think because if you look at last year, he had 990 yards, 6 touchdowns. The touchdowns, we'll see there. That's if that's kind of a little harder to project for him specifically, but I think just in raw yardage and raw carries, I don't see any reason why that should be inhibited. If he finished with exactly 990 again, I would not be surprised. I don't view anyone else on the depth chart as being so. If you want,
do you think there's any chance Bucky Irving becomes like a goal line back for them this year?
So I think because they have Liam Cohen as their new offensive coordinator. I think that there is a chance that in terms of receiving work, White and Irving will probably split a lot of the receiving work out of the backfield. But in terms of the carry work, I don't see Bucky kind of doing anything to inhibit that. If you want to, there are some, if you want to link guys where you draft their backup, there are some guys I would feel good about doing that for, and others where it's not. If you wanted to draft Bucky Irving and put him on your bench, if you draft White, I totally understand that, because I do think that there's going to be some splitting in terms of the receiving work. But if you are someone hey, there's this person at the top of the 1st and this person at the bottom of the 2nd in the receiver category that I love and I need to have if they're there, Rachaad White is someone where, if that's the case and they're my RB1, 100% comfortable entering the season with that being the case. So that's where I stand on him. So just optically, he makes a lot of sense given where he's being drafted.
Absolutely. I'm a big Rashad White guy. Obviously, he's Arizona State. And
Right.
I got to I will say I also had to watch Bucky Irving play in person this year, and so there's a little bias towards Bucky for that reason. I actually had to watch him play in person, and he's just incredible to watch in person, especially at the goal line. So there's a little bit of bias there, but I do like Rashad White. I liked him last year a lot, as well. I was very high on him last year, and he definitely did not disappoint me.
Right.
I'm moving on to a guy that to me I think is very interesting in this term, which is a guy who is very close to my heart on this one, which is Ramondre Stevenson. I have loved Ramondre Stevenson ever since he came into the league. Like when he got drafted and he had a really good training camp / preseason, I jumped on him. In my dynasty league that I kind of just started, I picked him up off waivers. I stashed him on my bench for a year, and it was an incredible move for me. He's turned out to be a very good player for me. And obviously, there's a little bit of scariness because but here's the thing. With Ramondre Stevenson, the thing that's scaring a lot of people away from Ramondre Stevenson is last year he was not that good. He had a really rough year last year.
Right. Not like full blown bust territory, but he was noticeably underwhelming.
Yeah, he was noticeably underwhelming last year. But a part of me believes, and as much as a great coach that he is, a part of me believes that was a little bit of Belichick's ego. Kind of coming in, like when a player makes a mistake, Belichick kind of takes touches away from them. We really lost a lot of Ramondre in the receiving game last year, which was what made him such a good pickup in a lot of leagues, was because he was so good in the receiving. And last year, he just really never got that insane of receiving opportunities that he had in previous years. And so for me, I look at it as there's a new coach in the league. There's a new coach in New England. They just gave him a huge contract. Like, I don't know if you saw the contract, but it was like I forget. Do you know exactly what the contract was? I forget what the exact contract was. 4 years. It was $36 million, 4-year deal, $17 million guaranteed. Which, for an RB, that's in this day and age, that's actually really good.
Yeah,
that's $9 million a year. So basically, I look at it as like they want to use him more this year. They want to kind of make him the feature back, the star back of this kind of backfield. Otherwise, you wouldn't give him that contract.
Sure.
Especially with his deal kind of coming close to an end. So for me, I look at it as like buy low on Ramondre Stevenson because right now I looked at it, he's going as the RB19 at pick 61 is where he's at. I think you could buy low there as like a 5th round pick, 5th, maybe even 6th round pick, and you can buy low. And I really think he has a chance to do that RB1 again, that RB1 or RB2 again.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's going to use a lot in New England. Especially with Drake May being a young QB that he is and that wide receiver core not being that great. I could see Ramondre Stevenson being that guy again.
My opinion on Ramondre has been fairly consistent throughout his career, which is that especially last year, I think by and large he's appropriately rated. Question for you though, are you at all scared of Antonio Gibson now being behind him?
Not really. And I think I would have been had he not got this contract.
Sure.
The contract to me tells me that they want him to be the RB1 and they want to use him. Because you're not, like, in this day and age, you're not paying an RB $9 million a year. Like, you're just, like, that's very, like, unless they're, like, insanely talented levels, like the CMCs, on that level and stuff like that, you're not paying a running back that much. So for me, I find it very hard to believe that you pay a running back $9 million to not to have his touches wane away.
Right.
And you're kind of stuck with him for 2 years, basically, with the guaranteed money. So I believe in Ramondre Stevenson. I really don't think Gibson really scares that much because also Gibson has a fumbling issue. And I think that's become very much known. There's a reason he lost touches to Brian Robinson in Washington.
Right.
It was because Gibson had a fumbling issue.
Yeah.
And in New England, that's not going to stand.
No.
So I really do believe that Ramondre will be the one there. So that's my personal opinion.
Yeah.
And now we move on to, our first rookie running back, Anders. You want to talk about your?
Yes, I would love to. There is nothing I would rather do with you, Zach. Nothing more than talk about Jonathan Brooks. I'm sure that you know this. It's very rare for second round running backs, like second round in the actual NFL draft running backs, to be available this low right now, depending on the size of your league and where you're drafting. Brooks is going somewhere in the anywhere between rounds 5 and 7. That's kind of his range. It depends on where you go and depending on whether you're non-half or full PPR. But I'm a big advocate for Brooks. He is something that I will be targeting in every draft that I do this year. He will be the ACL stuff that he had in college this past year is why he's this far down. I think if he ends up getting cleared, then he will maybe not be as much of a sleeper because I think he might jump up to the top of the 5th and even in some leagues bleeding into the 4th. But right now, because of where he stands for ADP, he is a sleeper, which is why I have him on this list. He will already be the most talented running back in Carolina. That's not really that's not. I don't really view that as a hot take. And
who's the other one there? Is it Sanders?
It's Sanders and Hubbard. And Hubbard has been someone who has been discussed as a fantasy sleeper for a couple of years now, and he never really kind of breaks through in the way that we've been told he will. And so he's kind of lost me a little bit. And then Sanders, I also don't view as a legitimate threat. Again, if someone gets in this day and age for running backs, if they get drafted in the second round, that is indicative of where they will be used. And when he gets healthy, he will get overwhelmingly the most usage. He will get overwhelmingly the most receiving work. That is a strength of his that people will see. I think that was a very underrated component of what made him so good at Texas. I think people were more blown away by just the downhill athleticism. But I do think that his draft indicator, like where he was drafted, is an indicator. I think if you take that with how that'll affect his usage and just the talent that he's going to get, the talent that he has, and especially in relationship with who's in with him in the backfield.
Yeah.
And then you mentioned Dave Canales earlier. And if you look at the receiving work that he, not in a massive scale, but when it did happen with Rachaad White last year in Tampa, it was really effective. And I think that Brooks will benefit from Canales being there and understanding how to put backs with reception ability in the best positions. I think of all of them, Brooks would be the biggest benefiter of that, regardless of where he was on the depth chart. But I think that the second he is at 100%, he is going to be shoved to the front of the offense. And so I think that until he is 100%, he's going to be available in the 6. And I think that as a flex option, just with the upside, I think it makes a ton of sense. And I think that given the talent, it's not a very complicated argument. So
no, absolutely not. I kind of also agree. He was always kind of the number one running back coming out of his class. I really like him as a running back. I obviously, I have a soft spot for Texas RBs. I think they're always kind of coming to the league kind of hyped up, and think a lot of times they end up becoming pretty solid. So I like Jonathan Brooks. I think he's gonna be really good. But I'm also gonna switch to a rookie here.
Yeah,
this is a guy.
I'm with you on this one for sure.
This is a guy that I'm kind of excited for, simply because I don't know. It's just a feeling. And that's Trey Benson. He's going to a situation where he has a chance to really thrive. I think Arizona is a perfect landing spot for him. And the fact that early on, he's not going to be asked to be the starter there. He's going to have to learn and develop a little bit. But he's also a guy that I think could be immediately ready to go when he's called on. And listen, James Conner has been one of the most consistent backs in the NFL for a very long time. If you put James Conner on your fantasy team, you're guaranteed like 12 points a game or more every single week. It's just really how it is. And Anders, if the stats don't lie on that either, he's been incredible. Like ever since he kind of broke out in Pittsburgh, he's been an incredible guy to have. That being said, he's getting older. The injuries affect him a lot. He gets hurt a lot for him. So I look at it as like Trey Benson is going to have a shot at some point this season, because there is no way James Conner plays 16 games.
Right.
So that's kind of how I look at it. And so I think Trey Benson is a guy that will get a tryout at some point this season. And listen, Florida State running backs are just dynamic. They are fun to watch. They're just really just a great competitors. And I think Trey Benson is another one of those guys. I think he can join the likes of Dalvin Cook and those greats from Florida State. So I really like what Trey Benson did in Florida State. I think he's going to be really good. And yeah, he's my sleeper. I think he's going right now. I think they have him going at RB40, pick 129.7. But I truly believe his upside is probably
RB like 25.
Yeah, like RB 25. Like James Conner is RB 24 right now, and I think that's kind of exactly where I put Trey Benson.
Yeah, no, I am 100% with you on this one. I mentioned for Rachaad White, there are some starting running backs where I do think it is worth it to chain link their starter, and others where I don't. Like as an example, like if you draft Saquon, I don't really think it's worth it to chain link like Gainwell to him. If you draft James Conner, you should 100% be drafting Trey Benson.
100%.
So I'm with you on this one. Yeah, no, I think it's, I think that the talent's there, the situation's there, the person in front of him has some health stuff. I think it absolutely. Now in fairness, I do, this is not saying, and I'm assuming, I'm speaking for you a little bit, but I'm assuming that this is not saying that Trey Benson at RB40 is more valuable than James Conner at RB24.
No.
But the linkage, but I think that the linkage is important.
Oh, 100%. And listen, I'm not saying he's better than James Conner either. I'm not saying that you should take him over James Conner. Absolutely not. 100% not. James Conner, like I said, is going to be really consistent. He's going to give you the points you need. You should take James Conner. Mm-hmm. He's going to be great running back. But like we said, you should also then take Trey Benson, because there is no way in the world in which James Conner plays 16 games.
Right.
And we've kind of learned that at this point. There's no way in the world he plays 16 games. Yep. And Trey Benson will get starts. He will get starts. He'll probably get mini starts. There's a chance he probably gets 4 or 5 of the starts this year, maybe even more.
Yep.
So you should probably draft Trey Benson for when those weeks that officially are when he's on the IR, or when James Conner is on the injured list. Draft Trey Benson, and you'll be able to have a guy that can pick it up right where James Conner left off and 100% get you over 12, 15, 20 points a game.
Yep. Definitely.
And now we're moving on to a veteran
A
A
veteran.
guy that is not young.
Yeah. This
Um,
this is someone who I would never ever imagine would be in a sleeper conversation, but just based off of where he is, I have to put him here just because of the upside. And I'm going to talk about Nick Chubb, who currently sits, from what I have in my notes, at RB, and check this for me, Zach, at RB 37.
I have him at RB 28.
28. Okay.
I have
Maybe
him at RB 28.
so. There's a range of results. So I think like this is my again like I this is a very this pick to me in terms of why this is sleeper requires a very specific sort of set of circumstances, but if he is going to be 85% of himself, then it's worth an investment, especially if, by the time he gets to 100%. And again, I understand why he's this slow because we don't really know when that is, let alone just getting on the field regardless. We don't know if it'll be week 1 or 4, what have you. But by the time he gets to 100%, which will, assuming nothing gets re-aggravated, that will happen at some point this year. He is 100% capable, as we have seen, of having an RB1 week and can do that consistently. And so I think that, because remember how I said for Rachaad White, he works really well for me in the 3rd round if you go double receiver. I think that if you go double RB in the first 2 rounds, and whatever combination of guys that you get have very clean health histories and don't really, and we're getting injured in a sort of long-term fashion is not really a concern of yours. I think just stashing Chubb and getting him in, whatever that would be, the 8th, 9th, 10th round, depending on the size of your league and just where things shake up, there is no reason why that shouldn't be the case. Because again, like if he ends up being just 70% of himself, or if he splits 50-50 with Jerome Ford, then you're going to get that for a lot of people that are in that range anyway. Like you're going to get that. Like, what are you going to, people that are in that sort of similar range, Chase Brown or getting Roshan Johnson or Kendre Miller, whatever, guys that are also going to split. You can get that with 70% health Nick Chubb at some point, but but those guys are not even in the same stratosphere of the upside. And so I think that if you load up on running backs early and you feel comfortable with their health, I think that just having him as a stash piece late, I think is something that I would absolutely endorse, because if it works, it's going to really work. And if it doesn't work, then you end up with, Chase Brown, essentially. So just logically, it makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah. I agree. I listen. Nick Chubb is, when healthy and fully healthy, he was a top 3. He was a top 3 RB in this league. And it's hard for me to believe that even with the injury issues, that he won't go back to being somewhat close to that form. Not that form, not that form, but like, you know what I mean? Like he'd go be somewhere close to being like, kind of looking like Nick Chubb again. And so I find it very hard to believe that he's going this low. Like you can get him, like I'm looking at it now. You can get him at 1 second. You can get him at pick 96, which I suck at math, but I believe that's like the 8th round or 9th round.
Right. Depending on the size of your league.
Depending on the size of your league, I usually go by 12-person leagues. That's just what I do. But yeah. But moving on, I'm going to the last running back of our talk. A guy that the only reason I'm bringing him up here is because this is the first guy on our list that's about to have his first real chance to show what he can do. This is a guy that sat behind one of the best in the league for many years, and for a couple of years, and now he's going to get his first real chance to be the guy, to be the star of the show, and you can get him at pick 78, and that would be Zamir White. Zamir White, I really like, and he really impressed me late last season. He got a few opportunities late last season, and he took advantage of them. He looked like a really incredible running back going forward. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, he had 3 weeks where I think four of the last 4 weeks, I think he had over 12 points. I'm not like 100% positive on that, but I think I was right with that. I think Zamir White had like a really, like I said, I think Zamir White had, I will need to look that up, but on exactly what his stats were. But let me look. I got it right here. So Zamir White, yeah, his last 4 weeks, he went 17 points, 15 points, 15 points, 13 points. Like, that's a fantastic audition when you're about to become the starter. And so Zamir White will go into this year as the starter, the guy in Las Vegas. His only real competition is Alexander Madison, who blew his audition last year, and blew his chance last year. So I find it very hard to believe that Zamir White won't be just the number one option. Like, Alexander Madison might. The only thing that worries me with White, and I will say is the only thing that worries me with White, is he was not that effective in the receiving portion of this. He had 2 of those 4 games that he had in the year, he had 4+ catches, but most of the year he wasn't really doing anything receiving wise. And some of that had to do with the fact that Josh Jacobs was getting insane touches. But yeah, so if he can get receiving and get in the receiving game for Las Vegas, and you're looking at a guy that has insane upside. I mean, you're going to look at a guy that's probably going to get not exactly what Josh Jacobs got for touches, but like still up there in touches. And Antonio Pierce has made it very clear that he wants to run the ball a lot. Which is very good for Zamir White owners and people that are going to have Zamir White. So I just truly believe, I think Zamir White's going to be a guy that can possibly jump up to possibly say, I think he has a chance to be a top 15 back this year. I think there's a chance he could be an RB1 this year for some team. Even if it's the 12th best team in the league, he could be an RB1 for you. But I'd say more his upside is probably a high RB2. So I think high RB2 for him, but I think either way, you're probably looking at a guy that's going to probably be a must start. Whether that's a flex spot, that's an RB3 spot. You're looking at a guy that's definitely a must start, in my opinion, in Zamir White. I don't know what you think, Anders, but I think I'm really high on Zamir White.
Yeah, no, I think I kind of put him as in the same sort of situation as Rachaad White, where if you go double wide receiver in the first 2 rounds and you leave the draft with Zamir at your RB1 after getting a round 1 and a round 2 receiver, would I be enthused? No. Would I feel very comfortable? Absolutely. I think the Zamir White, Alexander Madison battle will be won by White pretty quickly. I think it's going to be pretty obvious kind of right away. Just the injection of volume, I think, will be very abrupt. And yeah, just with the head coach that he's about to have, it's a very ideal situation. And so, no, I absolutely, I think that's totally, or if you want to go, if you are someone that picks if you're in a 12-person league and you go, and at the start of the draft, the 12-13 term, this is just like off the top of my head, you go like Puka and then Marvin Harrison Jr. as your 1-2. And then on the next turn, go Rashad White, Zamir White. That's great. I think that is an incredibly successful first 4 picks. So no,
and I think there's even a world in which you get, the guys you said, but then you go like Rashad White and then go with like a Jonathan Brooks or Trey Benson and then get Zamir White. Like based on where he's going on ADP wise, you could get him in the 5th round pretty easily.
Yeah.
Or you could get him in the 6th round even. Like you could go, like there's a route where you could go, like you said, Puka, Harrison, Rashad White, Ramondre, wide receiver, Zamir White.
Right.
And that would be a fantastic first 6 picks.
No, of course.
But I have one question for you, and I'm going to do a little bit different than we had planned. I want to ask one question for you here, Anders. So there are currently 10 running backs projected to go in the first 2 rounds.
Mm-hmm.
You have CMC, Breece Hall, Bijan, Saquon, JT, Jahmyr Gibbs, Kyron Williams, Derrick Henry, Isaiah Pacheco, and Travis Etienne Jr. Those are the 10 running backs.
Yeah.
Out of those 10, who would you most avoid?
The one that I would shy away from the most is probably, you said Kyron Williams, right?
He's number 7, yes.
It would be him, probably. I think that they've had, first of all, he just had the insane season that he just had, and they still drafted Blake Corum. And Corum is in that kind of tier of rookie running backs where the fact that team drafted him indicates that they plan on immediately giving him strong usage. I would also say that I think even regardless, they have a bit of a history of dispersing their running back usage a little more than most teams. And I think that Corum is talented enough to, if he gets a little bit of a chance, and he will make the most of it, and it will give them no choice but to continue to disperse. And also Kyron, there are multiple guys that I think from a receiving standpoint, I would, he's kind of in the lower tier in that sort of ranking. So yeah. If I had to pick one, it would be him.
Okay. I kind of was honestly in the same boat as you. I was actually hoping you'd say Kyron because I was going to say Kyron as well there, because a part of me also looks at his last year as like kind of a fluke in a way, not a fluke, but like kind of like a weird year in the fact that the Rams physically had no one else there to compete with him for any touches at all. Like no one. Like Akers was gone after week 4. And like after that, like it was Kyron's show. The only thing I will say Kyron is touchdown numbers are just incredible. Right. And it's hard to really look past that and say don't draft this guy high because his touchdown numbers are there. And I really don't see Blake Corum as like a red zone threat. So I could see that being a reason you still go with Kyron Williams pretty early, but I do think there's room for regression there for Kyron, and I kind of expect we'll see some regression from him. Just because I feel like last year was just so perfect situation for him to break out in, but I don't know if this year is that. And so as we officially move on to our wide receivers, I want to preface this by saying we are not saying that all these wide receivers are going to be absolute stars right out of the gate, but we do believe that these wide receivers can have a chance at being good, and and do not judge us for basically having them all be rookies. Because I will say 5 of the 6 wide receivers we're about to name are rookies. So let's move to the wide receivers, Anders, and you will list your first wide receiver, which happens to be one of the top 3 of this year's class.
Yep, absolutely. So I'm going to start off right here, and open us with Malik Neighbors.
Mm,
So, who
Preach.
from what? And I want you to check this for me. From what I have in my notes, I have him as the wide receiver 24. Can you get
Let me. I have him as the wide receiver 25.
25? Okay, perfect. So I think, to me, the way that I see it, the quarterback situation in New York is the biggest kind of dropper here. As time went on throughout the draft season, the gap between, and I'm not necessarily, and I did not advocate for this as much as other people that I know, but the gap between Marvin Harrison and Neighbors slowly continued to shrink. But I think that Daniel Jones being the quarterback or Drew Lock being the quarterback definitely kind of hinders how high Neighbors can get drafted. I think that from a talent perspective, we view a lot of wide receivers as being in archetypes where you can get, instead of taking this receiver here, literally get the same person but around later. So last year for me, I was a big advocator for Chris Olave because my line of thought was, why invest a second round pick in Garrett Wilson when you can literally get the same receiver around later? So I think that, so last year Olave was a cheaper version of Garrett Wilson. I think this year Malik Neighbors is a cheaper version of Chris Olave, or, to, if you want to keep the rookie part of it consistent, a cheaper version of Marvin Harrison. If you just look at the talent archetype and the situation. I mean, just flatly, look at the depth chart that he's walking into. It's like Wan'Dale Robinson and a bunch of nonsense. Maybe because of the quarterback play, there's going to be a little bit of there's a pretty hard ceiling as to how many touchdowns he can grab, but there is no, there is no reason why he should not be flirting with 1,000 yards by the end of the year. And with the amount of volume that he's going to get, just based on where he is in the depth chart, in a full PPR league, forget it. Like, he's asleep in a full PPR. Malik Neighbors is absolutely like in that sleeping giant category that I think Olave was in last year. And so he is someone that, in that fourth or fifth round, I will absolutely be targeting over and over and over again.
Absolutely, and I definitely didn't change my name on StreamYard to a certain name, but so you can't see it here, but you will be able to see it when it's on the YouTube. I am a very much known Daniel Jones hater. And I'm very much a known Daniel Jones hater. And I will stand by that until the day I die. I do not like Daniel Jones. I do not cheer for Daniel Jones, and I believe that he is never been worth the contract he is getting. And so for that reason, I find it very hard to trust any Giants wide receiver ever. And listen, Malik Neighbors is a great wide receiver. I like him. However, I will not be drafting any Giants wide receivers in the near future. Simply because I also did or may or may not have jumped the gun and drafted Jalen Hyatt pretty early in the draft last year, and it did not work out well for me. Right. So I will not be trusting Giants wide receivers, but I respect your belief that Malik Neighbors is a sleeping giant and he will have a good year. Yeah, I cannot believe that with Daniel Jones at QB. So yes, 1 second here. Okay, now we go to my first sleeper, which is a guy that I'm also very high on, kind of like I was on Jalen Hyatt last year. So hopefully this doesn't bounce back to bite me. But a guy that I'm very high on, he is Pittsburgh Steeler, a rookie, Roman Wilson. and I like Roman Wilson a lot. I liked him at Michigan. I think he's a gritty, great wide receiver. Um, and from what I've seen, at least, I really do believe he has a really good shot at the number 2 wide receiver role in Pittsburgh, which is kind of like the perfect spot to be, in my opinion. I love that wide receiver 2 position in Pittsburgh. I think it's always just, you always know what you're going to get from the wide receiver 2 in Pittsburgh, which is, I like. The issue is with the QB situation there, we don't really know, but I do. I trust Roman Wilson a lot in the fact that I really do believe he's that guy. I don't know about you, but yeah, I just look at Roman Wilson as kind of like a guy that I think he has a real good shot at like breaking out this year. I think I think George Pickens is going to get a majority of the coverage kind of drawn to him now in Pittsburgh, and he is very much a deep threat. Roman Wilson can be deep threat, but he is more of like he is more of a I think he is more of a like an inside wide receiver, definitely more of a guy I feel like can go there, but I don't really know. I just really like Roman Wilson this year. I like that Pittsburgh wide receiver 2 spot. Plus, if you look at where he's going in the draft, I mean, you have to scroll down a long ways to find him. He's not even in the top 50 in terms of wide receivers. They actually have him at wide receiver 76, Anders, which to me is crazy considering, like, if you really think about it,
Right.
wide receiver 2 in Pittsburgh has always been very good. Like, you've always been able to kind of get a lot out of the wide receiver 2 in Pittsburgh. So I'm surprised he's that low. But what are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I mean, once you get past like once you get into the 70s, that's like on the fringe of like even being draftable for skill for receivers and backs.
Yes.
You've definitely I did not love Roman Wilson in college, so I have that sort of bias. And then on top of that, I don't love the quarterback situation in Pittsburgh, and I also do not Arthur Smith is the offensive coordinator in and out, and he's going to run the ball and use a lot of tight ends. That will be something that I think that's going to be a noticeable change there. But I do think that the fact that he is immediately the wide receiver 2 in that system, just the opportunity for volume, I do think that 76 is a little. I assumed just he would be somewhere in the 60s. So yeah, if Roman Wilson is the last pick of your draft and you can get like a 600-yard season out of him, then I buy that as a steal for sure. I think by the time we get to like week 5 or 6, he'll be a pretty trendy waiver wire pickup. So no, I think your argument is solid. I'm going to go to another rookie.
Really?
You're going to see a lot of these. So I am going to go to someone that I loved in the draft and was someone that I planned on targeting for fantasy regardless of where he went. But now that he is where he is, I am even more excited about him than I was before, and that is Keon Coleman, who I was kind of not beside myself, but like noticeably shocked when he fell out of the first round, really, where at one point he was in top 10 pick range. I think that this to me is a talent pick. I think this is a pick for if you liked him in college and you believe that he will keep being what he has been, then that's I think the right decision. No one he is like people don't really fully realize like he will be the wide receiver 1, and no one available this late. I have him as the wide receiver 49. Zach, is that where you have? Yeah.
Wait. Let me check. I see him here. Wide receiver 43.
43. Okay. No one, yeah, in wherever he in the 40s he is, no one who is being picked that late should be entering that kind of situation where you're the cleared wide receiver one, maybe not clear, but are very arguable, especially given the news with how well he's done with camp, with his quarterback being probably the first quarterback that's going to be taken in the fantasy draft this year. But he is going to be available, and that's a really promising combination of traits. I think that his physical size at 6'4" makes him a legitimate red zone touchdown threat in short passing situations. Dawson Knox is slowly dissipating from the offensive ecosystem, and Kincaid can only get you so far. And so for Keon Coleman, I think that an 800-yard, 5-touchdown season is absolutely on the board. And more specifically, if you are someone who has targeted and selected Josh Allen in the 3rd round, and you want to double down as much as you can and maximize the best you can on that investment, and you are not in the situation to get Kincaid, then I think that this is honestly a pretty underrated. The Allen Coleman stack, I think, is going to be pretty underrated. And so I just think that a rookie this talented who is entering the situation with that good of a quarterback, being that clearly the number one, I think that combination of circumstances should not fall at the wide receiver 43 or 49. And so it just makes a lot of sense to me. I think if you're if you go double RB early, if you're in a 3 wide receiver league and Keon Coleman's your flex, I am leaving that draft ecstatic.
100%.
What do you think?
So I changed a couple. So I like Keon Coleman. Okay, I think I'm actually shocked he's going that low because you're right. He is the wide receiver 1 in Buffalo. And it's crazy to me that he's not being considered that, really, when you're looking at these ADPs.
Right.
He also seemed he became like a media sensation after the draft, like all his interviews and stuff like that. He seems like a fun guy and like a guy that's going to be like a really good guy to have in the locker room. Mm-hmm. And I think Josh Allen really vibe with him in that way. And not to mention, that's the only thing we're really talking about. He has Josh Allen throwing to him. You don't think he's going to have a good year when he's the wide receiver 1 and Josh Allen's throwing to him?
Right.
I think I just look at it as like, I think Keon Coleman, I think he has a huge upside here.
It's a pretty uncomplicated argument. It's not really that hard to talk yourself into him.
No, you just talked me into him there. So there we go. You just talked me into him. But no, I'm moving on to my next pick. And I'm going to be honest, I changed a couple of these because I kind of didn't like where I was going. I wanted to kind of be kind of closer to the closer range. But one guy I'm going here is kind of another guy, kind of like, I'm surprised he's this low in terms of ranking. And that's Brian Thomas Jr. Brian Thomas Jr., I think, if I'm not mistaken, is going as the wide receiver 51. Which seems a little crazy to me, considering that the Jaguars just gave Trevor Lawrence $56 million a year, and he is the wide receiver 2 on that Jaguars team. So it seems a little crazy to me that Brian Thomas Jr. is that low. Because if you have a QB that's being paid that much money, I'd expect for them to throw the ball a lot. And if that is the case, you're really only battling Christian Kirk for targets there.
Yeah.
And that's not a very hard battle to win. I like Christian Kirk a lot, but like I don't see Christian Kirk as a wide receiver 1. So for me, it's like I truly believe Brian Thomas has a chance to jump into a wide receiver 1 category this year with the Jaguars, especially with where he was drafted. I find it very hard to believe that he doesn't get like wide receiver 1 targets this year. And so that is why I'm shocked he's going 51. And listen, I was never like that big a fan of Brian Thomas Jr. in college, but when you're drafted to a team that has Trevor Lawrence there, and you're at the wide receiver 2 position with another wide receiver that probably should just be a wide receiver two as well, you're gonna have a chance to immediately break out and cement yourself as wide receiver 1. And so if he can do that, I think a pick here, say right now he's expected to go 132, a late round pick here on late round snag on Brian Thomas to see if he can take that wide receiver 1 leap early would not be a bad idea. And I would not be upset leaving a draft with Brian Thomas in a bench spot.
Right.
With a possibility of him possibly having a wide receiver 1 in Jacksonville with a $56 million QB throwing to him. I don't know about you, Anders. I know you obviously don't like dealing with Brian Thomas in college either, but I think the upside is there. I think the situation is perfect for him to succeed.
Yeah. No, if you are someone who thinks that Trevor Lawrence's season last year was a post week 11 injury fluke, then you should absolutely be drafting Thomas. The one worry that, like as a bet, someone to take a bench spot, the one worry that I would have is that they are paying Kirk a lot, and they did give Davis a pretty decent amount of money. And a lot, and Ingram, a lot of his projections are around, maybe not quite as ridiculously high as when he first got there, but they are on the higher side. So I would maybe worry. And I guess to me, this is honestly probably not an argument against Thomas Jr. specifically, but an argument against any Jacksonville skill position player, is the idea that the sort of the wealth is going to be spread a bit too thin amongst everyone. But
I think you're right. I mean, I agree.
In terms of just raw like ADP value and nothing else, Thomas Jr. is better value than Davis or Kirk in terms of where they lie. So
yeah. And I think the thing is as well, like I said, you're kind of going in a situation where you have 3 wide receiver 2s all competing for who's going to be the wide receiver 1. Right. And a first round rookie feels like a guy that can jump into that wide receiver 1 spot. That's just me. Like you're not drafting Brian Thomas in the first round if you don't believe he's going to be the wide receiver, if he's going to be the wide receiver 1 for your team eventually. And especially when you have guys that are, listen, Davis has always been a wide receiver 2. Christian Kirk has basically always been a wide receiver 2. It's really I feel like it's hard to believe that one of those 2 is finally going to step into the spotlight and be a wide receiver 1. I find it very hard to believe that. Brian Thomas has now never been a wide receiver 2, or never really been that. I would say Brian Thomas Jr. has a chance to kind of take over and be that number 1 guy for them. Kind of like the Zay Flowers last year.
Right.
In a way of where he was kind of going to a situation where they had Odell. They had a J.K. Dobbins who was supposed to be really exciting. They had an Odell. They had Rashad Bateman, who was supposed to take like the next leap kind of guy. And Zay Flowers took over that wide receiver 1 spot and sent Odell packing and sent Rashad Bateman never broke out because Zay Flowers jumped up and became a pretty great wide receiver 1.
It also reminds me too of Lamb his rookie year, being a first-round pick, entering a room that had Cooper and Gallup.
Yeah.
That's also, I think, it's a similar, and they were drafted in similar spots too within the first round. So I think,
I could see Brian Thomas doing that. So anyway, that's my Brian Thomas. We will now move to Anders' wide receiver 3, which, by surprise, is another rookie.
Yep.
But a rookie I like.
This is my deepest one in terms of like sleeping giant, like really underneath, like someone who there are a lot of situations where this person might not even get drafted in your league. And that is Adonai Mitchell, who is someone who I love, who I, again, like Keon Coleman, loved in college and love now, and was going to target him in fantasy regardless. And am even more excited given the situation that he is now entering. I currently have him in my notes as the wide receiver 60. So very far down the line. Someone who would be in the last kind of 2 or 3 picks of your draft. If you are like Zach and you think that Anthony Richardson, what we saw from him last year, is who he really is, this should absolutely be someone that you should be drafting, because he was viewed as being stolen for a reason. And again, like he like Coleman, because of his 6'4" size, I think has legitimate red zone touchdown upside. But he is going to be at worst the 3 receiver and has the potential to surpass Downs as the 2, even in camp or in the preseason. And so I think that he, a lot of people like Pierce still. And I understand that, a part of why he could be going this low is because the wide receiver room is really crowded. But, Jonathan Taylor doesn't really have a lot of receiving upside. And again, the tight end room, that's more of a committee position for Indy. There is not really one person that kind of overwhelmingly kind of takes over that position. And so I think there is a lot of room for his talent to show, and I do think that he will be rewarded for that. And I think that, again, like even if you don't get Anthony Richardson, you can still invest in the idea that you think he's going to be really good by getting Mitchell. And obviously I don't really view him surpassing Pittman as the number 1 as being something that is in his range of outcomes, but I think that he could absolutely finish this year as the clear 2. And I think that he's a really good quarterback situation to kind of complement the talent that he already has.
This is hard for me. I like Mitchell, but I am actually higher on Downs than I am on Mitchell at this point this season. I am a Downs truther in the way that I believe that Downs is that guy. I thought he had a really, really good year last year. I think he showed that he's the capable wide receiver 2 for Indianapolis. I do believe Adonai Mitchell has basically already passed Pierce in this aspect to be the wide receiver 3, which is hard because I was an Alec Pierce truther 2 years ago, and then Josh Downs passed him, and then Adonai Mitchell passed him, and it's been kind of it's in a downturn for Alec Pierce.
Right.
But I'm a Josh Downs truther in the way that I think he will be wide receiver 2 going forward this year. And so I do believe that, like, if you're getting Adonai Mitchell, you're getting the Colts wide receiver 3. That is kind of how I'm seeing it. But if you can get him late, I definitely think this is a guy to kind of stash and just see if he can pass Downs. But I personally am a Downs truther in the way that I don't think he will this year. And I don't know about you, but I really am a Downs guy. So that is the thing, right? Because it really is just Adonai Mitchell versus Josh Downs who takes that wide receiver 2 spot. Yeah. It's a battle between those two, and me personally, I do believe it's Downs. But I could also see a world in which Adonai Mitchell has an insane camp and takes that. time to go to mine, and I promise you guys that it was not going to be a sixth rookie. I am going one guy that is more of a veteran. And by veteran, I mean he literally he officially is on his second team. A guy that I am kind of always been kind of high on, and he's never really kind of helped me, but I hope I'm right this time. Deontay Johnson. And it's hard, right? Because Deontay Johnson had so many opportunities to snatch that wide receiver one role in Pittsburgh, and he never really did it. Especially in the red zone, right? Like he was a terrible at catching touchdowns. Just was. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. He was terrible at catching touchdowns. And so it's hard for me to look at Deontay Johnson and be like, he's a sleeper. But when you look at where he's going in this draft, let me get 1 second. Let me get back to the first page of this thing. When you look at where he's going in the draft, he is currently the wide receiver 39. Which to me is kind of crazy in the fact that, he still is going to be a wide receiver one. And as I said earlier, I think Bryce Young is going to break out this year. I think he's going to have a bounce back year. And so with Bryce Young's bounce back year comes wide receivers bouncing back as well. And so that is personally why I think Deontay Johnson is in a perfect situation for that. Yes, the room is kind of crowded. I wouldn't say it's that crowded. I would say it's kind of crowded. And just the fact that, like, I don't know about you, Sanders, but I'm looking at it kind of like, Deontay Johnson really is fighting Xavier Legette for that number one wide receiver spot.
Right.
And, they also have Adam Thielen there, but he obviously can kind of tell that he's kind of getting past his prime. Jonathan Mingo still has not yet to break out there, but maybe he has a season, but I don't even know if he's listed as the wide receiver 4 in the depth chart for Mingo, so I don't know if that's really going to happen for him. But I just like the veteran presence of Johnson there. I find it hard to believe that Legette will come in and immediately just kind of become this guy for them. But I do like Johnson to kind of be that guy for at least the first half the season before maybe Legette kind of breaks out. And so I think if you can get him, because right now he's projected to go in the 100s still. If you can get him at that position, at the 100, he's 100% a guy that can come and be a starter for you guys, for your team early in the year.
Yep.
And maybe even later in the year. If he has a really good start to the season, who knows if it's stop. But I'm a big Deontay Johnson guy. I've been kind of saying he's going to break out kind of and have that year for years. And I kind of think that with Bryce Young breaking out, I think Deontay Johnson has a chance to break out as well.
Yeah. No, if you are someone who wants to take a piece of the pie of Carolina's offense where you do think that there is a realistic situation where Bryce Young takes a significant step forward, but also want to hedge it by not actually drafting him, Deontay Johnson, to me, is the piece to take over Thielen or Legette in terms of value at ADP. So I think if you want to make that bet, this is the right piece to lean into that.
Yes. So as we move into our last position group here, tight ends, we'll kind of speed this up a little. We've kind of gone a little bit long, but we'll speed this up a little bit. But I am excited to talk about some tight ends here, Anders. You're bringing in one that I think is kind of interesting. It's kind of I don't know if it would be really a sleeper for me, but I don't know. I guess I haven't looked at ADP for tight ends, but he's a guy that had a really good year last year, and he was a guy that was really, really, really valuable last year for a lot of teams. So
tight end, it's kind of hard to call a tight end like a sleeper just because they're a one-off position. So you can only so many get drafted. So the spectrum of or the threshold of what is a sleeper and what isn't is kind of more saturated than backs and receivers. But the first person that I want to talk about is Jake Ferguson, who right now I believe on ESPN is listed as the tight end 10. So this to me, this is very quick for me, which is just the reality that he is going at the tight end 10 and is the starting tight end on a team that is a legitimate candidate to be the number one offense in football again.
Yeah.
I don't really view it as that combo. I like Luke Schoonmaker, but just in real life, but for fantasy, I don't really view him as being someone that will kind of interject with what Ferguson does from a fantasy perspective. And yeah, no, I think when you say starting tight end and clear number one tight end on what could potentially be the number one offense in football, you would expect that to be his top 7 tight end, but you can get him, firmly in the 7th to 8th round. If not even a little later, depending on when that kind of second wave of tight ends start to go. Because again, you might get a league where more people like to punt the position than in other leagues. And so I just think the situation that he's in calls for him, he could absolutely finish as a top 5 tight end. I think that's very much on the table given the situation he in. So the argument for him, I don't view as being that complicated.
Yeah, no, it's not that complicated. I'm surprised he's 10, to be completely honest. I thought he'd be a top 6 guy, top 7 guy. Now we move on to a guy who I have never been one to jump on the train. I have never been one to jump on the bandwagon. Every year I'm like, I'm not going to fall for it. And I've done this since his rookie year. Every year I'm not going to fall for it. And this year I might fall for it. And that is Kyle Pitts, if you didn't already realize. Does Kyle Pitts actually have a quarterback, Anders?
Maybe.
That's what you say. That's what you say. Yes. That's what you say. Yes. He has a quarterback that loves to throw to tight ends. Let's be completely honest here. Kirk Cousins is like top 10 and top 5 in receptions in his career are tight ends. So, Kirk loves to throw tight ends, and he's on an offense now that has a tight end. Here in Kyle Pitts, that for many years everyone's been saying this is his year. This is his year. This is his year. I actually think this is his year. Like me personally, I'm gonna say it. I think this is his year. And he's going as a 10-8 right now, which to be fair is kind of higher than I expected him to be. But I'm happy. I think he has a top 5 upside this year. I really do. I think this is finally the year where his top 5 upside kind of comes into play. And I expect to see Kirk targeting him a lot. We saw with TJ Hawkinson last year how much Kirk trusts the tight end position. And so I really do believe this is a year in which we look at Kyle Pitts and be like, this is his year. And so with that, I will ask Anders for a comment and let him go on.
So yeah, I think that the people that are optful, first of all, I like the situation, not just in terms of the quarterback upgrade, but I don't think that the skill position room is crowded enough to really kind of inhibit him at all. And I do also, because the upgrade in quarterback is so drastic, I think that there is optimism on Pitts. I also think that there is a collective optimism in terms of the people that are high on Pitts are also high on London, or are the same people that view like Darnell Mooney as like a big sleeper as well. And so I think it's like all the boats are kind of rising together. And so usually I try to not take too many pieces from one team versus like I would feel comfortable having like 3 players from Atlanta on my roster, just given the quarterback So
100%.
now the whole God, this is Pitts' year thing is not just based off of him. It's now based off of his surroundings and changes in them that support it. So
100%. Obviously, I feel like Kirk Cousins is one of the best QBs in terms of spreading the love that we have in this league. What Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, Adam Thielen, TJ Hawkinson, Irv Smith got some love as well, but every single player that was ever played with Kirk Cousins the last couple of years in Minnesota has elevated themselves after playing with Kirk Cousins because of the fact that he spreads the ball around. KJ Osborne, perfect example, right? He elevated himself. He's now in New England where he has a chance to be more than just a wide receiver 3. He can be a wide receiver 2 there for them. So I like what Kirk Cousins does for these offenses. And I really think I agree. I kind of believe that this could be a year where you could go heavy and get like a London Bijan Pitts stack and be very okay with it.
100%.
And be very okay with it. So that's kind of my thought. But I will let you go to your next one, which it's a rookie.
Well, look at that. So I have Brock Bowers as my second person. I think that in a full PPR league, this is a no-brainer. I think that there's 2 big points on Brock for me. Number one is that first of all, he is another example, kind of like what I said with Brooks earlier, which is that the draft capital that was invested in him is indicative of the usage that he is going to receive. And I think that the rookie year that he had can kind of be similar to the one that Pitts had, where I do think that it is realistic that he gets 1,000 yards. And, Gardner Minshew, if that is who they end up going with, I think is someone who I feel totally comfortable throwing the ball to Bowers to and being able to reach the kind of, the yardage that he can, especially because he is a big play tight end. That is kind of like his ticket point. And I also think that because right now he's sitting at the tight end 12. And so he is in that sort of kind of people that like to punt the tight end position tend to do it just to get guys that have as high of a floor as possible, just basically doing it to not have to worry about it. Here, you can get him as the last starting tight end in a 12-person league in theory and be, stick to the strategy that you've always done of punting the position and get top 7 tight end upside. And so I think that if you are a tight end punter, it is a great option. Usually when you go with that strategy, you don't get people that have this high of a ceiling. And I think that, again, if it's sort of, if we think if he is it's a lot like with Marvin Harrison, like where if we think he is as good as we think he is going to be, then he should be drafted accordingly and ranked accordingly. And he isn't for some reason. And so I would feel totally, if I were a tight end punter, I would be thrilled with getting him at tight end 12.
Yeah, absolutely. Give me one. But yeah, no, absolutely. I 100% agree. I think for me, it's hard to really look at it as it's hard to really understand why he's so low here. But it's also very easy when you see that he has Gardner Minshew possibly throwing to him, because to be honest, like, it is a really bad QB room in there. But he was so good coming out of college, and he was so just a generational tight end prospect that it's hard to believe that he's going this low. And he's not getting the Kyle Pitts first draft treatment.
Right. Yeah.
Which is like, remember when Kyle Pitts is coming out, like people were saying you should draft Kyle Pitts in the first round his rookie year.
Right.
So for me, I'm going back and forth on whether I actually think this guy's a sleeper or not. Personally, I don't even know if I really consider this guy a sleeper. Because I don't think he's. I don't know, man. There's not a lot more tight ends left I consider sleepers in terms of this. But
Right.
I will say this. This guy showed upside last year that makes me want to believe in him. And that is Kate Otten. He showed upside last year in like some games that he looked like he could be a really good tight end. And he was very productive in the fact that you could pretty much count on him to at least give you 6 points a game, which as a backup tight end role was fire.
Right.
The issue for me is I don't think there's a way in which he gets drafted. Like I like in your league, unless you want to take him like your last pick of a tight end bench guy. There's not, like, to be honest, there's not really much of a need in these days to draft backup tight ends. It just really isn't a need these days in fantasy. So I don't really think I have another sleeper. I put Kate on in here, but to be honest, I don't think I really even consider him a sleeper. I'm just gonna head that. But there is somebody I do want to talk about, which is a guy that is currently going fourth in a lot of drafts, and I don't have a banner for it, but that is Trey McBride. He is currently the tight end 4. I think I love that for him. I like Trey McBride a lot. I'm really excited to see if he can be that guy for Arizona for years to come. I'm really excited for that. But another guy I really want to also bring up quick is TJ Hawkinson. He's a tight end 11 right now, but there's a reason for that, which is he's going to miss the first 4 to 6 weeks of the season. And when you look at a tight end that's going to miss that much, it's hard to really put him higher than 11. But when this guy is healthy, you know he's going to be a tight end 3. So somebody in your league should be willing to take the risk and take the risk of drafting Hawkinson to kind of store him for the first 4 to 6 weeks of the season. I don't know when you draft him, to be completely honest. Here, he's being drafted at pick 110, which is kind of reasonable. But if you want to jump on Hawkinson and get him, for the last half of the season in the playoffs, you're going to have a top 3 tight end in football. So I would say there's a reason to draft him. But Anders, what are your thoughts on like players that will start the season injured and out? And kind of where would you like take Hawkinson out? Where would be the first place you'd really take Hawkinson?
So I would draft. I think if you are because Hawkinson, I think just in principle, he will fall to a point where he would be available. Tight end punters tend to take their tight ends, 11th. Tight end 11 is the earliest they'll take it. So if you're a tight end punter and you have like a turn where you pick first or 12th, and you want to get it out of the way, like you want to go, if you want to go like Hawkinson and then Bowers, Hawkinson, Ferguson, or if you want to like look here, like in terms of like what the rankings are, like someone like that, like like take someone like Higbee, if you want to take someone, it may be, so you maybe just to like bring up something that you mentioned, maybe you really like Pitts and you want to take him like at his ADP and then kind of just stash Hawkinson because you're willing to wait for Hawkinson because you like him more than the other tight ends that are going around that 11, 12, 13, 14 range, then I think there is a use for him. But yeah, I've tried to I generally try to avoid drafting people where we know for a fact they're going to start injured. I think if they open the year questionable, I'm willing to roll the dice with it, like what I said earlier, both with Jonathan Brooks and with Nick Chubb. But if they're going to start out the year missing the first 4 to 6 weeks, I try to stay away from those because I try to, as injuries come down the line, I like to get off to as good as starts as possible. And I think that if you're willing to be very patient, it's worth it. I think if your goal is to get as many tiebreakers with people in your league as early as you can, then I would try to avoid it, which is what I
absolutely do. Yes. Well, that is the end of our show. But I will say this is not going to be our only fantasy football podcast.
No.
We're going to have plenty more of these to come because, like I said, we're both fantasy football nuts, and we can talk about fantasy football all day, every day.
We will do both an episode similar to this, but for guys that we're going to avoid or we think are overrated, and we will also do a shared screen mock draft as well.
Yes. That is very much true. But guys, we want to thank you guys for watching. If you are, please subscribe. We love to have that. But also just thank you for watching. We love talking sports with y'all. If you guys have any comments, if you have any comments on guys that we included, or that you don't like a player that we said, please let us know. We'd love to hear your guys' feedback on it. And yeah, we will have another podcast here soon. Probably an NBA draft, probably another fantasy one coming up. Because obviously I think the NBA draft that start tonight or is that tomorrow, Anders?
That's tomorrow.
Tomorrow. So yeah, so that is where we are at there. But thank you guys again for listening. Thank you that. And on behalf of my amazing co-host Anders Pryor, this is the Nerds Ruin Sports, and we are signing out. Thank you.